What do you need in order to set up an HF amateur radio station? Well, let me run through the key features that I think you should consider. Well, hello once again, and thank you for joining me on the Waters and Stanton video channel. The last video I did was talking about the choice of HF transceivers. I did miss out the Xiegu Chinese range, partly because I'd already done a recent video about transceivers from China. But anyway, I did miss out the Xiegu range, which is excellent value. The G90 really stands out as the budget class HF transceiver if you're on a serious budget, because not only does it cover the HF bands, but it also has an internal antenna matching unit, a digital display and a spectrum display as well. So it's great value, so check that one out. Anyway, what I'm going to do today is to talk about installing and setting up your HF transceiver, because there's quite a few questions that pop up from time to time about should you do this and should you do that, and do you need this and do you need that. Well, the first thing you need is you need somewhere to put the radio, and probably you're looking to get a desk. Frankly, the best place to get a desk from is IKEA. If you're in the UK, IKEA is the best source of getting some reasonably priced desks. There are others. If you go on to some of the music sites, again in the UK, Gear for Music do some nice desks, but they are more expensive. Gear for Music is the alternative. So IKEA or Gear for Music, you'll probably find you'll get a desk. You also probably need something on the desk to put ancillary equipment. In other words, you need a raised section on the desk to put ancillary equipment. So bear that in mind as well. You can always, of course, add that at a later date. Now, the next thing you need is a power supply, because it's conventional in ham radio that almost everything these days runs off of 12 volts, and that whilst there are one or two HF transceivers that have built-in power supplies, generally speaking they don't. So you need a power supply. You need a power supply that will give you at least 20 amps at 12 or 13.8 volts. 13.8 volts is the nominal voltage. There's two types: the switch mode, which is very small and very light, or there's the conventional, what we call analog, which has got the more heavy transformer inside. Some will say that the switch mode power supplies are noisy. Well, my experience is they're not. They may have been a long time ago, but the current range of switch mode power supplies, such as the Watson range, they are not a problem at all, and they're very compact. You can poke them under the desk somewhere. If you want the more traditional analog power supply, it's going to be heavier, but you can put it under the desk likewise. The choice is really yours. Now, as you expand your station, you'll have more and more equipment that requires 12 volts, and so not initially, but you must perhaps consider some distribution system for distribution 12 volts to the various bits of equipment. And we do a range of distribution boards. MFJ do quite a wide range, so check that out if you add equipment, because you'll suddenly find you've got so many wires going to the power supply, the terminal won't take it. You need a distribution board, so check out the MFJ distribution boards. Now, HF transceivers, well, I've covered that quite deeply in the previous video, so check out the previous video. The HF transceiver choice is very much a personal choice, so check out my previous video on that, and that will give you some guidance. Now, the next point is going to be quite painful for some of you, but it's very valid. For goodness sake, read the manual. Preferably read it before you try and use the transmitter or transceiver on the air. Two reasons. First of all, it will give you some idea of how to set it up correctly. And secondly, you may well find some items in there which you didn't realise the transceiver could do. And also, you may find the answer to some questions that you would have to ask a bit later down the line. So my advice is to make yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, sit down and browse through the manual, because that way you will actually get to know the transceiver a lot better than you will when you fumble about, have to keep looking at the manual, finding why this doesn't work, why that doesn't work, go back to the manual again, etc, etc. So as painful as it is, read the manual. Let's talk a minute about microphones. The radio that you purchase will almost certainly come with its own microphone. We call them, these sort of microphones, handheld microphones or fist microphones. And they've got a press to talk button there and the connection there to go into the radio. I should mention that this connection is not universal. So I've got an ICOM handheld microphone there, and that will work basically with all ICOM HF radios. And the Yaesu microphone will work with all Yaesu radios, but unfortunately you can't use a Yaesu microphone with an ICOM radio and vice versa. So do bear in mind that this connection is not universal. One of the things that you need to remember is when you use a fist microphone, talk across it, don't talk into it. If you talk into it, you'll get breath sound and it'll be a bit puffy and so forth. So always talk across it. And in fact, I use one of these with my ICOM 7300 and I get some very good reports on the audio. Now, whether it's because I talk across it or what, I don't know, but certainly try not to speak directly into the microphone. Do you need a separate microphone? What's the advantage of buying a more expensive microphone? Well, one of the choices would be to buy a microphone which is a desktop microphone. In other words, it's a freestanding microphone. Bear in mind that with the fist microphone, you've got a PTT button there, which switches the transmitter on and off, the transceiver on and off. If you've got a desk microphone, do make sure that it's got a PTT button on it, so you can press to talk and release. They've usually got locking buttons as well, so you can just press it once and it locks and you've got hands-free. That's the great advantage of a desk microphone, it's hands-free. Now you do want to make sure that you've got a microphone that's directional. If it's omnidirectional, what it will do is pick up all sorts of extraneous noises, but it's not so much the extraneous noises, because you may have a quiet shack, but you get what we call reverberation. And in a smallish room, it's a very boxy sound. And in fact, I've heard it on some of my videos occasionally when I've been using the microphone. I thought, gosh, that doesn't sound so good. So you do want to make sure that you're still speaking fairly close to the microphone if you've got a desk-mounted microphone. There are some microphones you can get which mount on booms and so forth. Heil do a range of those. The other choice, of course, is a headset. Now, you're not likely to want to change the microphone immediately, but as time goes on, you might want to think, well, I'd like a bit of hands-free operation. I can understand that. So if you don't want a desktop microphone, what you can do is opt for a headset. Now, the most well-known makers of headsets for ham radio is Heil. They do a range of headsets with a boom mic. But you still have to remember that with a headset, you lose your press to talk. On most transceivers, you've got a transmit receive button, a button you actually press. You've also got what they call a Vox. It means to say that when you speak, the transmitter or transceiver goes over to transmit, and when you stop talking, it goes back to receive. And it works fairly well. The only thing is that you do tend to sort of keep saying "and" in order to keep the transceiver in the transmit mode. And if you don't do that, then it's constantly clicking between transmit and receive. So not everybody likes Vox. Yet Heil actually do a little switching box which goes into their headset. It's like a hand press button, but of course you're back to PTT then. So as good as headset is, you have to remember that you need to have some way of transmitting and receiving. You can quite easily actually make yourself up a little switch box. Because all the press to talk is a make and break. And on the Heil headsets, they've got I think it's a 1/4-inch jack socket, I think. And all you need is a 1/4-inch plug with a switch on the end, and you've got your own little transmit receive button. So there's the choices. You've got the fist microphone, which works quite well. You've got the desktop microphone, which equally can work quite well. And of course, it's quite smart. I mean, a lot of people buy the desk microphone because not only is it hands-free, but it looks smart, it looks professional. And then of course you've got the headset. Not everybody likes listening on headsets. I have used headsets, but I must admit I still prefer to hear the sound coming out of the speaker. But there are occasions, of course, when you want to make sure that your operation is quiet because you've got a baby or somebody in the next bedroom, and therefore the headset is ideal for that purpose. Now, where should you situate your radio room? Well, obviously it's a question of fitting in with the rest of the domestic household, and some opt for a shed in the garden, which is nice because it's a dedicated shed, you're out of the way, and you've probably got an easy method of running coax to your antenna system. But you do need to make sure it's secure, of course, from theft and that sort of thing. And also you need to make sure that it's thermally okay, because you don't want a lot of dampness. So let me say you've got to thermally insulate the shed, and also you really need to provide some heating, because in the winters that we have, even though with global warming, we do get some pretty cold nights, even days. So take that into account. I think a high proportion of us operate from a house, indoors or bungalow. I'm fortunate I've got a spare room I share with my wife. She has an office here. But if she's busy and I want to go on there, I put a pair of headphones on and operate CW with an electronic key, which is totally silent. So that's one reason for learning CW. Anyway, you want to make sure that it's easy to get a coax run out to the antenna system. You also want to make sure that you're not going to cause too much disruption in the household when you're operating. And only you will know your circumstances, but it does mean to say that you should give it some thought, rather than just thinking, oh well, I'll put it in that spare room there, and later on you think, wait a minute, I didn't think about this or that, and I can't see what's happening to my antenna system. If it's windy, I want to know the antenna's still there, and I can't look out the window because I've got the room in the front and it should be at the back, or vice versa. We can't have the perfect situation, and obviously we've got to make the best of what we've got. But it does merit some thought before you go blundering on and then think, oh gosh, this is not the best place for the radio room. Now when it comes to the antenna itself, you need to start off with an antenna that's guaranteed to work. Now that may sound a rather strange statement to make. What I mean is you need an antenna that is likely to work. In other words, let me give you an example. You've got a smallish garden, but your local club have a net on 80 metres, and so you think, well, that's the place, that's the band I'd like to start on. The problem is that probably your 80-metre antenna will have to be shortened, bent around the garden. It'll probably be quite low relative to a half wave, and it won't work terribly well at all. Now you may make contact quite happily with some of the club members, but when you go off piece and trying to work other stations, you don't have too much luck because it's not radiating very well. Much better to start with an antenna that's likely to work. Now, the 40-metre band is a great band to start on, and you can't really do much better than a 40-metre dipole, which is, what, 66 foot long. You can bend the ends to get it into the garden. If you've got even smaller space, then consider a 20-metre dipole, which is half the length, about 33 foot or 10 metres long. And you can erect that as an inverted V with some form of a central mast to support it, and that will probably work quite well. It'll give you contact. So the whole point is you want to start with an antenna that's going to work, and the antenna that's going to work best for you is one that fits easily into your garden. You can look at verticals and so forth, and you can buy multi-band antennas. It's really up to you. But if you're starting and you want to get on the air quickly, you really can't do much better than a single band dipole. It gets you on the air, and then you can think about what other bands you'd like to operate on and what other alternatives there are in your particular garden for a different antenna system. Now another antenna which is very popular is the end-fed half wave, and I've been promoting that quite a lot on this channel because it's a very efficient antenna. It's as efficient as a dipole, but it does give you multi-band operation. There's one or two videos on my channel that covers this, but basically if you were able to squeeze in 20 metres of wire, even though you had to bend it a bit, and end-fed it, that 20-metre length of wire would not only work on 40 metres, it would work on 20, 15 and 10 metres. So you've got a multi-band aerial very quickly, very easily. So take a look at that option as well. As I say, there's one or two videos on my video channel that cover that. Now when we come to coax cable for HF, there's a lot of, I want to say, rubbish mentioned in some of the channels, but basically you don't need anything special for HF, particularly if you've got a fairly small garden. If, for example, your coax run is going to be about 40 or 50 feet, you can quite happily use RG58, which is the thinner coax. You may lose about a dB or a bit on 10 meters and 12 meters, but you'll lose very little. And you really won't lose any significant amount on the lower bands. If you want to upgrade, go to something like RG213. And if you've got RG213, really and truly, for the average garden, there's no point in spending any more money on even more expensive coax. Remember that 1 dB is the smallest change in signal that the ear can detect. So if changing the coax cable results in a gain or an improvement of less than 1 dB, it's absolutely pointless. There's no point in wasting a lot of money on expensive coax on the HF bands unless you've got an incredibly long garden, and most of us haven't. So RG58 is great. It's not quite as efficient as RG213 on the higher bands, but it works. And RG213 is probably all you need for most gardens, so don't overspend money on coax. Now, in addition to the main transceiver, one accessory which I think you should consider is a VSWR meter. Now, I can imagine you saying, well, wait a minute, I've got a VSWR meter in my transceiver. Why would I want another one? Well, let me explain. Most HF transceivers, most modern ones, have got an antenna tuner unit or an antenna matching unit inside. And the matching unit is the last thing in the transceiver line. Before that, you've got the VSWR meter. So the lineup in your transceiver is the transmitter, VSWR meter, antenna matcher, in that order. You're most likely to use your antenna matcher because probably you've got a little bit of VSWR and you want to get rid of the last bit, so you use the antenna matcher. And when you use the antenna matcher in your transceiver, it shows almost a perfect match. But in actual fact, you've still got VSWR on your antenna. All you've done is actually fooled the transmitter into thinking there's a perfect match because it goes into the antenna matching unit. The matching unit does its job, but you've still got VSWR on that coax cable. Now, if that VSWR on the coax cable starts to rise or is wavering about, you won't know about it because the VSWR meter in your transceiver will only be showing what the matcher is doing for you. It's not changing the VSWR on the coax cable. So it's really important that you have a means of monitoring your VSWR on your coax cable, and of course also checking the power output, because the power calibration on VSWR meters tends to be somewhat better than what's in your transceiver, because usually the meters are quite small anyway. And of course with the VSWR meter you've got a larger meter, and also it shows something near peak power. And if you put a steady carrier into your from your transceiver into the aerial, you'll actually be able to measure the actual power out. So VSWR meter, it's worth getting a decent one because it's an investment. They're not fashionable items. Once you bought one, it's going to probably last for ages and ages and ages. So it's worth buying a decent one. We do several VSWR meters. The top of the range is the Diamond, but there's some other ones that we do as well. So take a look on our website, and I'm sure you'll find something that suits. You obviously want one that covers the frequency range, but if we're talking about HF only, all of the VSWR meters cover HF, but you might want to invest in one that covers the 2 meter and 77s band as well for when you expand your station. Now, another couple of accessories that you might want to consider is an antenna selector switch, coax selector switch, and a dummy load. Let me talk about the selector switch first of all. If you've got a budget line transceiver, you may only have one output on it. If you've got a more expensive one, you may have two outputs on it, so you can switch from effectively from one antenna to another. It's most likely in your HF career you're going to have more than one HF antenna. So if you've only got one output on your transceiver, you're going to have to unscrew it and screw the other one in, and of course you can't do quick A/B tests. So it's worthwhile considering at some point in the future a coax switch. Again, we do some good ones. The best ones are Diamond, but we've got some other ones as well which are a bit cheaper but certainly very, very good. If you're going to get a selector switch, you might want to think perhaps 3-way or even 4-way. And I'll tell you for why. If you have a 2-way switch, you can switch between 2 antennas. And by the way, if you suffer with noise, some stations actually have a separate antenna for receiving. They have a separate antenna which is lower noise for receiving. And although it means you've got to do it manually, when you go to receive, you can switch from your main antenna to the other antenna which has got lower noise and then back again. But you're likely to have more than one antenna anyway. But you probably should consider at some point investing in a dummy load. Why? Well, 2 reasons. If you want to check the power output of your transceiver, it's best to do it into a perfect match, which is a 50 ohm or 52 ohm dummy load, and you can do the measurements then. It's really antisocial to keep putting out 100 watts or whatever it is on the band on an antenna when you're doing tests, particularly when perhaps you're adjusting the audio gain control on SSB and so forth. You have a dummy load, you're not causing anybody interference. And if you've got a fault on the antenna, or you think you have, you can always switch to a dummy load and just see whether the problem you've got goes away when you switch to a dummy load. So VSWR meter and a coaxial selector switch and a dummy load. You don't have to buy them straight away, but I think they're sort of things that you should consider investing in shortly after, or a little while after you've been on the air.
Now, what about logging your contacts? Well, I think most people these days use software logging programs. You can use a pad, you can use a spreadsheet, you can use a logbook. There's not so many logbooks available now, but you can, I think, still get paper logbooks. But the advantage of software logging is that you can very quickly look up call signs. You can very quickly decide or find out whether you've worked at the station before, and very often if you key the call sign in, up will come details of the station, and you can also link it back to QRZ. So software logging is very popular. I'm Mac based basically, and there's not so many logging programs around for the MacBook, but the very good one that I have used is RumLog, which is excellent. It's got a nice display, it's got a nice way that it all goes together, and it feels nice when you're using it. If you're a Windows-based operator, then I think one of the most popular programs is the N1NM login software, which I have used. It's got a lot of features in it, and so you can do all sorts of wonderful things with it. But again, it's a very popular software program. There are many login software programs, but I would encourage you just to perhaps go on YouTube and see what people think of them, decide which is best for you. But a software login program is it's very convenient, and it does enable you to actually extract information from your software login system for DXCC and all sorts of things like that. So it's personal choice. I know some operators still use paper logs actually, but I have actually finally migrated to software logging. Now, if you're a newcomer, there comes a time when you have to make your first CQ call, and I've seen various videos on YouTube about how you should deliver the CQ call, the tone you should use, the attitude you should take. Really and truly, basically you just call CQ. There's no particular skill. You use your normal voice and you call CQ. Obviously you need to make sure there's a clear channel, and you may or may not get a reply. And don't be too disheartened if you don't get a reply, because it depends on the time of day you call CQ and what the level of activity is on the band. So if you put out CQ 2 or 3 times, you get no response, probably it's just lack of activity on the band. The next plan is to actually tune around the band and find a station that's calling CQ, and at least you can go back and hopefully you'll make a contact. If you're a bit shy, then it's wise to actually make a note on a notepad about the things that you want to discuss. There's obviously the signal report, the weather, your location, the equipment you're using, that sort of thing. If you have a sort of a prompt list on a notepad, then at least you've got something to talk about. If there's a contest on, it's actually quite a good way of making some quick fire contacts without getting involved in long QSOs, and a lot of newcomers don't want to get involved in long QSOs because they think they're going to run out of things to say. So if there's a contest on, it's not a bad idea to join in, because they're very snappy contact exchanges. And if you're not quite sure what exchange to give, have a listen around and see what other stations are using. Normally it's a signal report followed by a serial number, and it's a good way actually of logging quite a few contacts in a fairly short period of time, and also seeing how well your system, your antenna, etc. works. So contest is quite a good way to get stuck into amateur radio. And finally, one of the things that plagues well not all, but a lot of ham radio operators on the HF bands is noise. And unfortunately, it's something we have to live with. Generally speaking, if you've got a noise level, local noise level, you'll probably find that there are some bands that have got less noise on than other bands. But we all have levels of noise, and it's not unusual to see an S7 noise level on the S meter. But fortunately, even with an S7 noise level, there's plenty of signals way above that level that you can make contact with. How can you reduce noise? Well, there's no science to it. What you should do is you need to make sure that you've got a line isolator at the point where the antenna either goes into the transceiver or the VSWR meter, as I mentioned earlier. That can help. The type of aerial you use can also have an effect. It was always thought that vertical aerials could cause more noise than horizontal aerials. I don't think that applies these days. And my experience is that it's really where the aerial is located is more important than actually the polarity of the aerial. You will find that if you use some form of loop antenna, then the noise drops quite considerably. In some stations where they've got really bad noise levels, they have a loop for receiving, and then they use the main antenna simply for transmitting. Noise reduction systems can help, of course. There's most transceivers now have got a noise reduction system, and they're quite effective actually. They don't enable you to uncover signals you can't hear, but when you've got a signal that's only a little bit above noise level, then it can help quite a lot. So noise reduction systems on the transceiver quite helpful. There's also some external ones. BHI do some excellent noise reduction systems, but generally speaking, you can only hope to actually improve the reception when you've got noise on a signal that you can actually hear. There's not many systems really that can actually uncover signals that you can't hear at all. But take heart, experiment with the antennas, change the position of the antenna, check which bands are best for you, and you'll probably find that you can actually find some bands that are best for you. And if all else fails, you can always go out portal or go out mobile. I know it's a last resort, but there are a number of amateurs that do enjoy going out mobile, static mobile that is, and getting some good contacts. And of course, if you do that, you can actually position yourself in a better place than you probably are at home, where if you're out mobile, you can actually operate in areas where it's relatively uncluttered. There's not much noise, there's not too many buildings about to absorb the signals, and also if you park right near salt water, you're going to get a massive increase in your performance of your transceiver. So there we are. So that's my take on setting up an HF ham radio station. It's based on my own personal experience, and I hope that there's some pointers there which will guide you in the right direction. I can't claim to have covered everything, but I've covered the points which continually crop up in correspondence. But it's a great hobby, and it's a great part of the hobby, HF operation, because it's how it all started. Worldwide communication with simple equipment and simple wires. And in many respects, the ham radio operators were the leaders, because in the early days, the shortwave bands were really disregarded as not really being much use until the ham radio operators proved otherwise. And of course, then a lot of things changed, and we had worldwide communication on the shortwave bands, and we've still got worldwide shortwave broadcasting, etc. So I hope this video's been useful. Thank you for your support on this channel. Thank you for your support in our shop as well. It's Milton Keynes, much appreciated. Don't forget to check out our website for offers. Also, don't be frightened to pick up the phone and talk to one of the guys there. They'll be more than happy to help you. They're licensed ham radio operators, and they know quite a bit about the hobby and the equipment that or the accessories that you might be interested in. Don't forget to read the manual. Sit down with a cup of coffee and read the manual. You learn a lot. Anyway, you take care, enjoy ham radio, and as usual, I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.